have this tool on your website called Gap Maps, which reminds me of like a supercharged version of something I used to do, just like write notes about what are the problems.
Yeah.
You know, I used to think about this a lot. Like I had more free time, so I was like, what are all the science problems? You know.
Right.
And I mean, I would love to go to a Gap Maps conference with somebody giving a talk on each one of there's like probably 100
fun to do
items
that.
on that.
Yeah. There's, I think on the order of 100 of what we're calling the gaps, and there's more than 100 of what we're calling the sort of fundamental capabilities that are like potential partial or complete like solutions to the gaps that may be developed to different degrees. I mean, this one is also not all problems in science. Like we don't have on there, just understanding, the learning algorithm of the cortex or something. That's like a science problem that has a theoretical component, an experimental component, kind of iterative discovery needed to get to it. And there are, of course, many scientific questions that haven't even been formulated yet, right? And a lot of what people are doing when they're scientists is formulating a new question. So we're not at all trying to say with the gap map that this is all the questions, but we're trying to make a stab at saying this is kind of like captures some of the variance, meaningful part of the variance of these sort of roughly FRO-shaped projects where there's like a well-defined, legible tool system, dataset platform, systematic project or program that's just like, if it had resources and leadership and execution, that could be really accelerating of something that is otherwise like not very well served. And so if you think about the fundamental capabilities in that way, FROs or like ARPA, DARPA type programs, these relatively legible ones, and relatively kind of medium-sized chunks of ones. So we call it the fundamental development gap map as opposed to just like the science gap map.
Yep.
So it's not all science, but I think it shows you, right? Sometimes I like to think about it as it's a very large but not insurmountably large like set of problems. So if you imagine that each one of these things, let's say there are 20 fields of science, right? I don't know how many departments there are at MIT or whatever, but let's say there's sort of 20 buckets of like of science at large. Neuroscience, condensed matter physics, astronomy, and let's say that there are, within one of those fields, there's maybe on the order of 5 or 10 of these kind of like Hubble Space Telescope level, like we have to be able to record the neural activity, and we have to be able to map the wiring, and we have to be able to see the molecules, and we want to know how the system develops, and there's some kind of finite list of like kind of key observational like capabilities or perturbational capabilities. So 20 times 5 is 100, right? So order of magnitude, there's like a few hundred things that sort of should be these things in the gap map that could be addressed by this kind of FRO style approach. And let's say each one of those costs tens of millions of dollars. Okay. It's a lot of money.
Over what period of time?
That's tens of billions,
half
which is
decade.
kind of reasonable.
It's tens of billions. Yeah. It's like on the order of like 10 billion, 5, 10, 15 billion to like take out the gap map as like a set of gaps in science. That's like large, but like, there are individual people who have that.
It's like a rounding error in the Excel sheet of our economy.
It's less than the National Science Foundation spends in a year, way less than the NIH spends in a year. It's way less than industry R&D budgets. It's way less than individual programs.
What's the top of all the gaps? Which one do you think is the most likely to be kind of like an open AI, where if they actually come up with something like a ChatGPT moment comes out of one of these things, it's going to have this kind of like insane venture capital boom and like people on TV losing it about whatever. Oh no, we've mapped the brain. Now everyone's going to lose their job. Kind of like a response.
I mean, it's hard. It's kind of hard to beat AGI. I mean, some of the things that we are, broadly, I still think that neuroscience is one very big one. If we could really like program developmental biology, right? If I could, instead of having this choice of like my plant-based meat or my like animal-based meat or my like cultured cell-based meat, which costs $10,000, I could have like just grow a steak or something like that. I mean, that would be pretty great. But actually, one thing that we're doing that I'm particularly excited about, I would say had more of a catalytic role because it was an existing open source project, but we've converted it into a FRO and gotten it a lot of resources, is this project called Lean, which is a theorem-proving language for math. So if instead of writing your math on pencil and paper, or in LaTeX or some sort of informal language. You write it in this computer language called Lean, and you can click verify. And if your conclusions follow from your assumptions and the proof that you've written is correct, it will say, yes, it's correct. And if not, it will say, well, there's something messed up at step 5 here. This doesn't follow.
It's like what math, like T9, and what is it, autocorrection? Like,
Yeah.
well, so how in the messages here will be, is your math correct or not?
It's a verifier. It's an automatic verifier.
Like a math compiler.
Yeah, it's like a compiler and can tell you if your code doesn't compile.
Yeah.
And so I think this one is poised to be super important. So for one thing, a bunch of companies have already started up saying we're going to make mathematical superintelligence. Basically, we're going to use this as a reinforcement learning signal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to try to generate some math, and if it's true, then I get a reward, and if it's not true, I don't. And of course, there's the question of, can it formulate interesting conjectures and so on, or will it be able to learn that on the way to proving some well-defined result that you've already formulated? But sort of, can you automate math?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can automate math, I think you can also make software in a very different way. So instead of saying just vibe coding, right, what people are doing now, you actually say, here are the provable properties I want the software to have. I want it to never have this vulnerability where someone can hack into the memory in this way. I want it to be provably secure in these ways.
Mm-hmm.
I want it to be provably optimal in these ways. And then you can synthesize code, and not only synthesize code and does it compile, but you actually have a mathematical proof that code satisfies that spec, which could include a security spec. Can you make it impossible basically to have a cybersecurity vulnerability because it's actually mathematically provable that it's impossible to hack into the system, right? So I think that this formal methods and formal math is one of the areas where it could be very big. That's not totally distinct from the AI thing, but I think that could be a pretty big deal. Yeah.
Well,
for a relatively short time scale.
One of the ones I saw on there was you have a couple of kind of like greatest hits ones on there. So we like, joked about like, okay, if you make a list of all the discoveries that would win the Nobel Prize for sure.
Superconductivity,
it's like room temperature, superconductivity, cold fusion, low energy nuclear reactions. Yeah. I think one that's on there that maybe it's debatable if it would win the Nobel Prize, but like the ability to make non-sequential polymers, so basically like an artificial ribosome.
Yes, love that one.
It's what do you think? Like, have you seen anything interesting in those areas?
We would like to do projects in all those areas. So we have proposals for roughly FRO-shaped projects in, let's say, new fabrication methods that would allow you to screen through a larger number of candidate superconductor materials or other quantum materials and assay them in a more high throughput way. So sort of like a self-driving lab. Mm-hmm. For discovering superconductors, but that could be based on things that are not just setting up robots, but like lithography systems that would let you multiplex your experiment on superconductors more, and also you
have like pixels with different materials, and then you can test them at high scale.
So there's some work sort of towards that direction with the Acceleration Consortium, and U Toronto got like $200 million or something from the Canadian government to sort of do self-driving labs tied to materials, but I think that even there's some FRO-shaped projects, kind of discrete projects, including one that's been proposed on AI that gives you not only what the predicted properties of a new material are, but the synthesis instructions.
Right, that's critical.
So retrosynthesis for materials, complex materials. I would love to do something on artificial ribosomes, not necessarily cold fusion per se, but there's other people that have reached out to us on many body quantum phenomena and things that quantum nucleonics is one thing that people are talking about, of sort of, is there some scientific basis of sort of studying the things in and around nuclear interactions that might have anything to do with cold fusion. So I think there's stuff in material science. I think there's stuff in superconductors. Artificial ribosome definitely